Hi and welcome to episode 6, your final episode in your How to Make a Small Willow Basket. In this episode I'm going to show you how to make a simple border. I'm going to break it down into 2 steps so that there are actually 2 different borders that you're going to learn in this episode, making it hopefully as accessible as possible. This is the final, most important part of the basket. We're going to make a border. These are arguably the trickiest part of the basket, but I've really tried to break this down for you. We're going to do a really simple border called a track border, and then I'm going to show you how you can make it a little bit more if you want to. But the first part that I'm going to show you, you can leave it at that. If you're struggling with it, a track border's absolutely fine. Borders are complicated because they do quite a few things. So the stakes, the side stakes become the border, and that's partly what makes the basket so strong, that everything's connected to each other. It makes a really strong structure overall, but usually they're quite complicated. They might go behind 2 stakes, they then might go in front of 4 or 5 stakes, go behind and then come back out again. They have to be started off slightly differently and they have to end slightly differently while following the same pattern. So at this point of a basket, students are usually tired mentally and physically, and they're about to do the most complicated bit. So I really tried to pare this down to make it as simple and hopefully achievable as possible, and so the border will make more sense what's actually going on with it. I'll trim the basket properly at the end, but things like this are going to get in my way, so I'm just going to trim these down. I need to make a kink in my willow stakes, and it needs to be high enough that I can get a willow rod underneath. So I can use my fingernail, like so, and that will now bend where I've kinked it. It's quite hard on your nails. If you've got weak nails or you're not used to using your hands like that, you can use your secateurs. So these kind of secateurs, they only have one cutting blade. If I rest that against my stake where I want to do the bend and then push the willow into the secateurs, it will kink where I'm pressing it against it. And because I want it to be high enough that I can get a willow rod underneath, I'm just holding my secateurs at an angle so that the kink's higher than the border. So I'm just going to hold it at the same angle as I go around the basket. I'm going to do a simple track border that goes behind 2 stakes. So I can start anywhere, but I'm not going to start where I've got my little tips here, because they'll get in the way as I come back to the beginning. So you can start anywhere because it's a circle, just somewhere where there's not lots of things going on. I'm going to take my first stake and it's going to go behind 2. So it's just gone behind the next 2 stakes. And then moving to the right again, so on the face of a clock, I'd be going anti-clockwise. I'm going to take the next right hand stake, and again that goes behind 2. So it gets easier to go now because I don't need to think about it. It's just going to come out of the next gap. So if my last stake comes out of this gap, my next stake's going to come out the next gap. And each stake always goes behind 2. So I'm just going to carefully follow that around the basket. I'm always making sure that I have weight on this end one, because if I don't, it'll all just come undone. So everything's about control. A really common mistake students make is they get to this point and they go, oh, I don't know what to do next, and they totally forget about that one. So that's a gap. These that are laid down, they were stakes. These are still stakes. So my next one, it has to come under here because that's behind 1, 2 stakes. And just to make it as easy for myself as possible, this is where you need more hands and more fingers than you have. Willow's really flexible. If I go to my tip, I have a lot more control over the rod. If I can keep a big arch, my willow's much less likely to kink. It doesn't mean that it won't kink, but it's a lot less likely to kink. So I've gone to my tip, I'm going to feed it through the back of this stake that's now got a rod on top, and I'm going to pull this through. And then I have my final one. It's really obvious where it needs to come out because it's the only gap that doesn't have a weaver coming out of it. So again, I'm going to go all the way to my tip, feed my tip through, and I'm going to try and keep that big arch. If I pull more at the back, it'll make the arch bigger again. Okay. At that point, we have a track border. Really beautiful, simple track border. We can leave it at that. You can cut all of these off. I would do it just either on the stake or just past the stake, and it's done. That's absolutely fine, and that you can leave it at that. That's not a problem. I'm going to show you though how you can step it up a little bit to make it not a full complete border, but a little bit chunkier than this. It'll make it a bit more of a feature. So if you're tired at this point, or you've mangled your stakes, or you've had enough, it's fine to leave it here. But I'm going to show you how to just add a little bit more. I can start anywhere because it's a circle. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to go in front of 2 stakes. So even though these are all laid down, these are still stakes. So I've got a stake here and I've got a stake there, and then going to go back into the basket. I've gone to my tip. I'm going to try and keep a big arch to stop it from kinking. You can see my arch is getting tighter and tighter. I'm going to pull it back from over here because that'll make it wider again. And I'm just going slow, and I'm trying to manipulate the willow to go in without kinking. And then I'm going to cut that off on the inside, but just make sure it's past the next stake so it can't come undone. I'm going to take the next weaver, and it's the one to the right again, so we're moving anti-clockwise. It's going to go in front of 2 stakes, which will make it go in the next gap, so they're all following each other again. Gone to my tip, feeding it through. My arch is getting really tight, so I'm going to pull back from the other side, and I'm just going to try and manipulate it so I don't get kinks where I don't want them. If you feel like you're getting lost, if you don't know where you're going, it has to be this rod because there's nothing past it. I've got rid of them all. And if you're not sure where it's going to go in, it's going to go in the next gap. So I can see clearly I've got a rod going in this gap, so this rod has to go in the next gap. Okay, I'm almost back at the beginning. It's obvious where it needs to be because I have one going in before it, and I have one going in after it. There's nowhere else for it to go. So there's a lovely little gap there that it's going to follow. Again, I'm just going slow. Green willow's quite springing back on me, so I'm just making sure that I'm going slow and I'm feeding it in to my right hand as I go. Wonderful. So there we have a completed basket. We can leave it there if we want to, but we're going to put a handle on this one. Top tip for working with green willow, I'm gonna trim these, but I'm not going to trim them flush. So as green willow dries, it's going to shrink. So if I cut these as close as I can now, they're going to be quite loose in their setting as they dry. If I show you this basket here, I haven't trimmed this basket up. If you compare it to this one that's finished, you can see all the cuts that I haven't finished yet. I made this basket about a week and a half ago, and I can already see the willow starting to get like little ridges on them, which means it's starting to dry out. It's probably at a point now where I can safely trim it and it's not going to shrink anymore, or certainly not shrink enough that it's going to move back from the positions that it's in. On an English round, it's a really pretty weave. It would be really nice to be able to see it clearly going around the basket. So I would make sure as I'm trimming it that I'm doing that in a way that's really methodical around the basket. So I'd encourage you to go really slow while you're trimming and have your basket in a position where you can clearly see what you're doing. It can have a straight cut, it can have an angled cut, it can have a deep angled cut or a short angled cut. Whatever you decide to do, try and make sure that you're repeating that around the basket as you cut. So this is definitely a part of the basket where you need to go really slow. If you've got this far, you want to make sure you do the best job that you possibly can. I might still leave it a little bit longer before I trim the inside of this basket, so I might even leave it another week before I trim the insides, and that's just so that I produce the best basket I possibly can. They'll last longer the shorter the cuts are, the closer they are to the main body of the basket, but I don't want to go too short because then it will start popping undone and that will make a weak basket. So the basket that I've just completed, I'd probably leave it a week or so before I trim it any further, and then maybe leave it another week again before I trim the inside of it. The next thing I'm going to do is add a little handle. I really like these handles. Most of the handles that I make on my baskets, they have a wooden stick like this, and then I weave around them so they're wrapped and they have a nice little knot at the end. They're really lovely. They take ages. It would take me at least an hour to do a handle. It might take me 2 depending on the handle that I'm doing. These are really simple. They're really nice little handles. They're strong as well, so they're good, useful baskets. I don't know if you can see, but there's a tiny little peg either side. Because this handle isn't wrapped, if I just put the handle in, it's likely to fall out, especially as the willow dries. So I've added a clever little peg, which I'll show you at the end. For the handle, I don't generally add green willow. So this willow was green. I bent it like that, and then I used some string to hold it together. I then added loads of them. I always do loads of them. I left them to dry, and then once they're dry, take the string off and I've got a handle shape. This is too big for the basket, which is fine. I'm just going to measure. It'd be good for it to go down as much as possible. So I could have it that high, but I might do it a little bit shorter. I'm going to use my secateurs to do a long angle cut, and I'm going to do the white bit, the pointy bit, so it's facing the inside of the basket. It's not wrong to have it on the outside, but I don't want to see it on the outside of my basket. I just want to see the green. So I'm going to cut back here. Do a nice long angle cut. I'm going to do the same on this side at about the same height. So I've got 2 nice long angle cuts, and then I'm going to use my bodkin. So again, you could use a knitting needle. A flathead screwdriver won't really work for this bit because you don't want the wide bit. So either something like this or a knitting needle will be good. If you have any like imperfections in your basket, it might be good to add your handle in there. So just deciding where I should do that on my basket. I might go in here. So I'm going to go in with my bodkin. I'm going to try and get it to go in between the wood, so I don't want it to cut through my willow. I want it to go in between. So I'm going in as far as I can with my bodkin. The halfway mark, I have to decide where that is. I mean, realistically it should be halfway, but sometimes they can go wonky. So you can decide where you think halfway is best. I think it's there. I'm going to take my bodkin out, and I'm going to go in on the other side. There's a natural gap in between the stakes, so I'm going in next to that, and I'm just going in with my bodkin first to make it as big as possible. if I try and go down all on one side, this side will be at the wrong angle. So I tend to slowly move down both sides and just make sure as it's going down that it's not popped through the basket. The handle doesn't have to go all the way to the bottom, but if it can, that's good. So I'm just going slow and being methodical, being measured with my movements. That's pretty good. I've managed to get that all the way to the bottom. It's already really strong, but like I say, it might pop out a little bit as the willow dries. It'll be loose, so I'm going to add a peg. For my peg, I'm going to add dry willow because the dry willow is not going to shrink anymore. So this is just a little bit of white willow that doesn't have the bark on it. I'm going to do a nice pointy cut, and then I'm going to do a flat cut. I can go down anywhere in the basket really. I'm going to add a hole with my bodkin. I can go down in the wale. I wouldn't do it just under the border, but I can go down somewhere in the wale. I can go down somewhere in this weave. I want it to be as easy as possible, and I can clearly see the wood there at the top of the weave, so I'm going to go in there. So I'm going to find the middle of the stick. So I think that's there, and I'm going to use my wrapping iron to tap down onto my bodkin. My bodkin has metal at the top, so I can hit it with the metal and it's not going to warp the wood. Okay, I can see the bodkin on the inside, so it's definitely gone through. And then I'm going to get my pre-prepared willow stick, so the pointy bit's going to go through where the bodkin is. And then I'm just going to tap it in. I can trim that either side because that's already dry. I'm going to decide where I'm going into my stick. Again, I think about there. So I'm looking for the middle of my handle. Just go really slow with this bit so that you're not splitting it in the wrong place. Just going to do it a little bit more. Okay, so again, you should be able to see the bodkin through the handle. I'm going to take it out, add my willow rod. Just tap it in. There we have it. I'm not going to properly trim until at least another week, maybe 2 weeks, and then I'll give it a really good trim, and then I'll have a really beautiful finished little foraging basket. That's the end of the episode. Well done on completing your first or one of your first baskets. I really hope you found it useful and enjoyable. Let me know how you've got on in the comments. If you'd like to follow along and join my Creative for Nature community, just follow the links in the bio. Congratulations and well done. You've just joined a very special club of basket weavers.